Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
I want to welcome everybody to my fourth Tuesday Revolutionize Your Retirement Interview with Expert series to help you create a fulfilling second half of life. I'm Dorian Mintzer, owner of Revolutionize Retirement and your host for the series. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, and I'm really delighted to introduce Larry Jacobson. He happens to be a colleague and a friend of mine, and I think you're in for a really lovely treat today. As Larry says, retirement is not the end, but rather the opportunity for a new beginning. He believes that retirement is not a time to stop growing, and he coaches clients to discover untapped passions. And he combines these passions with their past knowledge and experience to build a plan of action for a retirement of fulfillment and purpose. He also is known for his coaching in leadership, entrepreneurship, and public speaking. So the background of Larry is really interesting. He successfully transitioned from being a CEO to a sailor, and he achieved his lifelong dream of sailing around the world. After that accomplishment, he transformed himself into a 6-time literary award-winning author and motivational speaker. His Voyage coaching and training program focuses on coaching programs that rethink and redefine retirement. His groundbreaking program, Sail into Retirement, combines home study and personal coaching feedback, and it's quickly achieved notoriety in the field. Larry's a California native. He's a circumnavigator and adventurer, and he has over 50,000 blue water miles under his keel. His books include The Boy Behind the Gate and his recent Let's Go, which is a children's version of the journey. He also recently published Navigating Entrepreneurship, in which he shares solutions and practical steps to success in an online video training course. He lives in San Francisco area, and he'll give you his website and email address later. And I must say that it's been a joy to have met Larry through the Life Planning Network. And we actually, about a year ago, my husband and I, we were in the Bay Area and had lunch with Larry. And my husband, who always has dreamt about sailing around the world, has said that reading and listening to Larry's book, which he actually reads himself on Audible, it's a wonderful thing to read, said he doesn't have to sail around the world anymore because he vicariously will live through Larry's journey. And we're going to hear about the journeys today. And I do want to comment that I had mentioned to Larry before, I actually went through his program and found it really helpful. So I think you're in for a treat today to hear him. So Larry, welcome to our interview. And I love the fact that you're a sailor and your program is based on the sailing life and metaphor. So tell us a little about you and what motivated you to sail about the world.
Hello. Hi, Dory and everyone. It's great to be here. What motivated me was when I was 13 years old, so that's going back a long time, I taught myself to sail in a tiny little 8-foot styrofoam hulled boat down in Long Beach where I was raised. And after that experience of just learning to sail and feeling, it just felt right. And I felt that at 13 years old, I had found my passion. So I was really lucky in that sense that I really loved it so much. At that point, I just sailed every day I could get a chance. And then when I was 16 years old, I bought a Hobie Cat, one of those little catamarans. And that was the same time that sailor, he was 16 as well, who circumnavigated, the boy who did it on his 26-foot sailboat called Dove, Robin Lee Graham. And I thought that was highlighted in National Geographic. And I thought, he can do it, why can't I do it? And so I one day came home and I announced that I was going to sail around the world, and to my friends and family. And they're like, yeah, sure, Larry. And so I just had this dream my entire life. And I finally found the opportunity when it was about 30 years later. life got in the way, business and making a living and creating a business and going from salesman to CEO. And anyway, finally was able to sell the company for just enough money to tease me into thinking that I could afford to sail around the world, which wasn't really true. But I went and I left everything behind, and I just thought, this is my chance, and I want to make my dream come true. And it was probably the most difficult thing I could ever imagine doing, was to get a boat all the way around the world. Dory, you've read the book, all the issues you have with mechanical breakdowns and weather and emotional breakdowns and crew issues and money. But I did it, and I am one of the few. There, a lot of people leave to go sailing around the world, but most people don't make it and turn around or sell their boat. So they say about 60 people a year actually complete a circumnavigation. So it's a small club, but I'm very glad that I did it. I spent all my money. How much does it cost to sail around the world? Everything you have.
And it also takes a lot of tenacity and perseverance, I would say.
I would say it does. And I'm thankful to my mother who taught me that. I remember at one point I called her from Singapore, and we were having mechanical breakdowns, and it was hot, and we were sleeping in the sweaty beds and on board. And I said, Mom, I think that's it. I think I'm going to sell the boat here in Singapore and come home. And she says, oh, no, you don't. You started this, you're going to finish it. You don't finish some of the time, you finish all of the time.
That's a pretty good lesson, but I can appreciate how.
Yeah, she was a good influence. That's why I named the boat after her, Julia.
Oh, that's nice. I do want to, before I ask another question, I want to remind people, go to the event page and please submit your questions there so that I can integrate your questions for Larry also. If you would, tell us more about the journey, because I think it really does represent you, in a sense, giving up your identity, giving up your work, giving up really so many things in order to follow a dream. And I think it'd be helpful for the listeners just to hear a little bit more about what that journey was like for you, if you'd be willing to share some of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did give up pretty much everything. My career, my income, my security, and that was a difficult one. And when I say security, that's kind of everything from having a car in the driveway to the local grocer knowing your name. I gave up my home. I left my home, my partner who didn't want to go sailing. And I most of all left my identity. And this is something I think that a lot of people can identify with, is when you retire, say you're a nurse or a doctor or a lawyer or a cop or whatever, then one day you're not. And what happens to your identity? It's gone. And leaving that identity behind as a CEO and then to become a sailing bum. And was I supposed to be drinking margaritas all day and singing Jimmy Buffett songs? You wonder, now what? But it was this dream that I had, and the dream was so strong, the pull. I think I say in the book that I felt like I was on a runaway freight train that couldn't be stopped, that I just had to do this. And the journey itself was incredible. And I say incredible in a lot of ways. It was extremely difficult to achieve getting a boat all the way around the world. It took 6 years, and it was I learned a lot, of course, about mechanics. It's funny that my father, when I was in high school, begged me to take auto mechanics because he said, someday it'll be useful for you. And I said, no, that's silly, Dad. I don't need to do that. I'm going to go into student government and be president of the class, which I did. And then when I was at sea, boy, did I wish that I had taken mechanics. But I had to learn the hard way how to fix a diesel engine. And I learned so many other things about leadership of my crew and about tenacity and perseverance. And there were just so many times when you just stop and think, I can't do this. I just don't, this is just too hard. And then I would get a new fresh wind of motivation and say, no, come on, you wanted to do this, do it. And I could hear my mother inside my head. And it was incredible in other ways too. It was incredibly beautiful. It was the places that we went to, from the South Pacific to Australia to Indonesia and across the Indian Ocean to the Maldives. And it was scary. We went through a place called Pirate Alley, which is in the Gulf of Aden. And we were 3 days sailing with no lights, no radios, just so we would not be a target for pirates. And friends of ours who were on another boat nearby were pirated. And so it was dangerous. We had incredible storms. I say that in a scary way, but also an exciting way. In the Red Sea, we experienced the worst storm that I've ever had experienced in my life. And the seas were 30 feet tall, and which is the equivalent of a 3-story house. The winds were 60 knots sustained for about 24 hours. And it was extraordinarily scary. I thought that this is it. We might just not make it after this. So there's so many experiences like that. It was incredible in the sense that I learned a lot about the world and the way I looked at the world. Before I left, I was a jet setter, and I had a fast car, and I was flying business class to all my client meetings and everything. And when I got home, I just didn't care about any of that stuff anymore. And I realized that the people who had the least in the world were the happiest. And it changed my whole view of the world.
That's profound in that. And I do want to comment that Larry reads his book on Audible. It was interesting. I had started reading it, and my husband had gotten it on Audible and said it was really good, and the reader was good. And I started listening, and I knew Larry's voice. I said, "Oh, that's Larry reading it." And he reads it really well. And I must say, being a sailor myself, but never having gone around the world, but being in storms and stuff, some of your experiences were so scary and harrowing. And
when I left, a lot of people said, "Do you have the knowledge to go? Do you know how to do this?" And I said, "No, absolutely not. I'm a sailor, but I had crossed the Pacific Ocean once as a crew in college, but that was it. I had no blue water experience other than that. And I thought, I'm just going to go and I'll learn along the way. And I discovered that you can do that. You don't have to be the expert to do something. You can become the expert along the way.
So how did you handle that, though, at the beginning? I know you had to go out and buy a boat that would be seaworthy for this kind of a voyage, but how much preparing did you do? I do hear that so much you learned along the way, but how much did you do ahead of time in terms of learning, preparing, getting ready for it? And was there a lot you did before, or was it mostly just during the time?
From the time that I decided that I was going to do this to the time that I left was 3 years. However, that's because when we sold the company, the buyer had me stay on for 3 years. But I got the boat in the spring. I bought the boat in Florida, trucked it back here to California, and that was a big truck because the boat was 50 feet and 25 tons. And that was in the spring, and we left in December. So there wasn't a whole lot of time to prepare. We did, I think, maybe 2 test sails or 3 test sails, something like that. But what we did do is tear the whole boat apart in the boatyard, replaced the engine, replaced all the electronics, replaced a lot of the plumbing, and tried to get the boat as seaworthy and ready as possible with new equipment. And that was pretty much it as far as learning. Oh, I took a diesel mechanics class, which really was not sufficient. They didn't learn enough really there. And that was pretty much it. And the other thing was just to go. I remember sailing out the Golden Gate and on early morning on the day of departure, thinking, what have I done? What am I getting into? And I had at that time, just to go down the coast of California, there were 4 other people on board. And I thought, Larry, you're captain. You better start acting like one. And that was it. It was just, I had to, the rest was learned along the way. I don't think you can ever have enough knowledge I don't think anybody's really prepared to go sailing around the world. It's just, even if I went now again, it would be, there would be new things happening that I would be experiencing.
Oh, I hear that. And what about the decision? Because I would assume people on the call are thinking about, I have a dream or I have a vision, but it's not shared by my partner or spouse, whomever. How did you handle that part? Because it does sound, you said your partner wasn't interested in doing it. And how did you handle your feelings and negotiate all of that?
It's a good question. And fortunately, my partner, Bob, was so supportive. It was incredible. And he said, look, this is your dream. You got to do this. You got to go. And we were such good friends. We had been together for 20 years. And we were such good friends. And he was so supportive. And he said, I'll take care of the taxes. I'll handle everything here. You just go. And but it was extremely difficult decision to make. You can't see me now, but I'm choking up a bit right now because that was one of the hardest decisions that I ever made in my life.
Yeah, it's such a difficult thing. And again, I'm assuming a lot of people listening are thinking, what happens when you have a dream and it's not shared and handled?
There can be like compromises. So, for example, Bob came to visit several times and sailed with us, even though he came to visit and for the people purposes, not really the sailing, but he had a good time. I had a client once said that they wanted to go on a cruise ship, and his wife didn't like to cruise and got seasick. And Bob gets seasick too, by the way. And I suggested to the client, you want to go on a ship, and she doesn't want to go on a ship. So what about you compromise and find a ship that doesn't rock and roll? So they went on a river cruise in Europe, and they were both very happy from that.
And that's a good illustration of that there can be changing the dream. It's not giving up a dream, but maybe changing it so it can work for whatever your own.
Exactly, for limiting the time.
What about the fears? You said, and I know in the book, that during the Red Sea storm and there were other storms, and how did you handle the fear or the prospect that you might not come out of this alive? How front and center was that? How did you deal with that?
Fear has become my specialty in my public speaking. And I think maybe because I've experienced so much of it, it's not like I was a soldier in the war or something, but the fears were definitely real. If you could just imagine being in the Red Sea and our boat was pounding into 30-foot seas, and 30 feet, again, that's the size of a 3-story house. And the wind was blowing so hard, it just sounded like a wounded animal just screaming through the rigging. And I later then found out that most people who get picked up by the Coast Guard off of a boat, they do so because of the noise, because it's so screaming loud. But when we were in the Red Sea, there was no Coast Guard. There's no Saudi Arabian or Egyptian Coast Guard to come and rescue you or anything like that. So you're pretty much on your own. And there was that time and other storms as well, of course, as you read about, including on the way to Australia from Vanuatu. And the way that I dealt with it was basically, I discovered that you cannot, some people say, oh, just power through your fears. Just ignore them. Just overcome your fears. What I learned is that doesn't work. What I learned was that you have to embrace your fear. And I developed it's 2 steps to manage fears, in my opinion. And that is first that you recognize that you're afraid. And if you'd seen me in the Red Sea, you could have heard my heart beating from 3 feet away. My eyes are wide open and darting all around, and I'm standing on my tiptoes behind the wheel of the boat. And I was alert because fear does something to you. It's the fight or flight that we have in us. And fear is nature's way of making you focus on the task at hand. You're afraid, and so you say, okay, I'm afraid. I'm scared out of my wits here. Okay, great. What are you going to do about it? I'm going to embrace it and say, I'm going to let the fear give me that focus and that clarity and that strength. And I'm going to use that right now. And so the fear doesn't go away. If you're trying to make the fear go away, it's not going to happen. the fear is with you, but you have to accept it and you embrace it. You say, I'm all right. I'm afraid. Let's keep going. And that's the way I dealt with fears on just about every time, I would say.
Sounds like some good example, because I'm thinking not everybody faces the kind of the fear of life or death in the middle of the ocean, but just even the fear of change can be very immobilizing.
It can be completely immobilizing. And for people who are retiring or already retired, a lot of people go through fear, which is why in my course, Sailing to Retirement, there's an entire module just about how to deal with fear. And I think there's a couple of things that happen. One is that people are afraid of choosing the wrong direction. So let's say someone retires and then they decide they want to start a little business or something, and they're wondering, is this the right thing to do? Maybe I've never been in business before, or maybe I want to open up a little coffee shop. I don't really know how to do that. And the fear immobilizes you from actually starting. And that's because people are expecting the fear to go away, which it will eventually once you get going. But you had first have to recognize that you're afraid, embrace the fear, and then keep moving forward. And it goes for a lot of different aspects of retirement. What if I go down the wrong path? What if I start my business and then I get sick? All kinds of different examples. But you do it anyway. You have to. Because otherwise you're frozen. It's fight, flight, or freeze.
No, I can see how it's applicable in so many different parts of life. And also figuring out ways to keep going other than your mother's voice inside of you, which it sounds like you're in Singapore.
Once we started sailing across the Indian Ocean, we left from San Francisco, so went across the Pacific Ocean, which was the longest. The Pacific Ocean was 21 days at sea. And that was the longest. But then the Indian Ocean was another 18 days. Once we started going across the Indian Ocean from Thailand, I recognized that the fastest way home was to keep going instead of turning around. And so I thought, we're already halfway. Let's keep going. And I was fortunate. For most of the trip, it was just two of us. It was myself and my very good friend, Ken. And he stayed with me, and it was the two of us going the rest of the way. When we crossed the three oceans, we took on two other crew members each time, and those were friends or people we met along the way. And so there would be four of us crossing an ocean, so it would be easier for us for sleep. It turns out that the most difficult passages were not crossing the oceans, but were the shorter passages, 2 days, 4 days, 5 days. And that was just Ken and I. And that was where there's just two of us, but the boat is continuing. You have to keep sailing. The boat doesn't stop. You can't stop at night. There's no McDonald's parking lot you can pull into. So it's a 24/7. And we had a schedule of 3 hours on, 3 hours off, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when we were sailing, it was overwhelmingly exhausting. And when we would be on watch, we had a little timer alarm attached to our safety harness that we would set for 15 minutes, because inevitably, when you're on watch by yourself, you tend to fall asleep. And the purpose of being on watch is to avoid ships and traffic. So we would have this alarm that would wake us up after that.
I can just picture that. I've done crossings where it's been, I think the most I've ever done have been 3 days with kind of 4 on, 4 off watches, and the idea of doing
And we found that we tried 4 on and 4 off, and we found that we just couldn't make it. That last hour, we were just too tired. So we switched to 3 and 3, which really, as then, is not 3, because you have to get up early in order to be on watch when the other person goes off watch. And so you don't really get 3 hours. And plus, because I heard everything on the boat, and I was so in tune to any changes in noises, it was very difficult for me to sleep. And I, to this day, actually still have issues sleeping when it's really windy.
What were some of the things you learned about yourself from having this dream, preparing for it, doing it, facing it?
I would say one of the biggest things that I learned, and one of the biggest challenges, was once I achieved my dream of sailing around the world, then what? My whole life for 6 years and a year before was just focused on this one thing, on just sailing around the world. And that was pretty much my singular focus. When I finished it and I came home, okay, I knew I was going to write a book, but I thought, okay, great. What else are you going to do? I'm one of those people that needs to keep doing something. And actually, one of the things I learned about myself is that I find contentment through achievement. If you ask yourself, where do you find your contentment? When are you content? And some people will say at the beach or relaxing or with my kids or whatever. And I've discovered about myself that I have to achieve something to be content. And that is quite a challenge, actually. But when I got home, I thought, now what am I going to do? And I felt for years like what do you call it, a round peg trying to fit into a square hole. Yeah, until I discovered coaching. And then I realized that my contentment can come from not achieving something for myself, but now that I've done that, helping other people achieve something that they want to achieve. And I get this incredible high from that.
We'll get to that more in a minute, but
yeah,
can you share a little more about how you handled that letdown? Because that's not unusual. After you have this big dream, it can be the sailing around the world, it can be getting married, it can be starting your own business, and then there often can be a letdown afterwards. Of
absolutely.
During those years, how did you associate that?
Yeah, I kept busy with my book. I think I probably took longer than necessary to write the book. It took me 3 years. And I kept busy. My mother was in ailing health, and I spent a lot of time with her, driving back and forth to Southern California and writing and editing and just making sure that I wanted it to be really great. And you've seen the book and you know that it's the quality of it and that. And I think I was wondering. Wondering and wandering. I just didn't know. And I didn't have the knowledge then to know that what I should be looking for, or that I should be trying a lot of different things in order to discover something else. Because I realized that probably nothing that I was going to do was going to top sailing around the world. It's the ultimate in sailing. It's the Everest of sailing. It's unless I flew to the moon, and even then I wouldn't be the pilot, so I don't think I would get the same satisfaction. But I should have been trying other things along the way, and that's what I coach clients on, is that they should be continually trying things. I just focused on the book, and then I was able to. Then I got my first speaking gig. Then I got onto the speaking circuit, and that kept me busy. And then eventually I found coaching, and that was the best thing that happened. But in those few years, Dory, I really was wondering. I was unsure of what to do and where to go and what my life was going to be all about now.
So how did you discover coaching?
Yeah, that was interesting. When I got back, I had a call from a friend of mine who was a CEO of another company, a big company in San Francisco, and he asked me if I could come in and help him out with something. And I said, sure. So I went over to his offices, and I go into his office, and I said, okay, here I am. What do you need help with in the business? You got people problems, or you got our personnel or finances or what? And he goes, no. He says, I'm the CEO. I know how to run my company. I said, okay, what do you want? And he says, I want to know how you did it, how you left your identity behind. He says, I'm a CEO. I don't know anything else. I don't know what to do when I retire, and I'm going to retire soon. And I thought, wow. So I gave him just on the fly a couple of ideas and answers. And he said, "Oh, good ideas. Okay, thank you." Then about a week or two later, I got a call from someone else who was a friend of his. And he says, "Hey, I understand that you can give me some advice about retiring and what I can." And I went into his office and I gave him some advice as well. Then I thought I might be onto something here. That was back in 2000 and I want to say 14, I think. And that's pretty early in non-financial retirement coaching days. Yeah. And so that's when I decided to get into coaching, and it's been happy ever since. And actually, what I did is I took a year off. I'm sorry to interrupt. I took a year at that point and decided, okay, I need to really figure this out. And I had never seen any books or publications about retiring and what to do with retirement. And so I just sat down for a year and I reverse engineered all the thoughts and actions and ideas that I had before, when I was leaving being a CEO to retire or to go sailing. And that's how I created that course, Sailing to Retirement. And then after I created the course, then I started exploring and I found that there were other books. There was a Life Planning Network book. And I was very pleased because I felt validated because the modules and the ideas that I have in that course were pretty spot on from the other courses and coaching. Yeah.
How long did it take you to develop the course?
A year. It took me a full year.
It's that full year, huh?
Yeah. And it even last year I was making some changes on it. It's a living and breathing thing.
That's great. But I know you wrote an article in Next Avenue talking about joy versus fulfillment. Can you tell us about how you differentiate joy versus fulfillment and maybe purpose and joy and fulfillment?
Yeah. I think it's a bigger deal than a lot of people make of it. And that is when the difference between joy and fulfillment. Let me just give you an example of that. If I'm sailing on my boat and I bring the boat into the dock, and I do a perfect job of docking it, that's joy for me. I'm happy about that. It's pleasure. And I feel good about having done that. If you're on the boat with me and I teach you how to perfectly dock the boat, and as we're coming into the dock, you do a perfect job and you dock the boat instead of me, that's fulfillment. So I was able to, it's beyond personal pleasure. It's beyond something. It's using your skills and your thoughts to you're part of something bigger than yourself. And this is the kind of thing that comes from teaching, from volunteering, from helping others in any way. And so I think that when people retire, you ask someone, what are you going to do when you retire? Usually the answer I get is, I'm going to sleep late, I'm going to travel, and I'm going to play golf or tennis or sail or whatever activity someone has been wanting to do more of. And then I say, then what? Where's the purpose and the fulfillment? Now, some people will say, and of course, if there are golfers listening, they're going to say, what? More fulfillment than golf? You're nuts. Anyway, if you're still looking for that fulfillment, you have to go further than those things. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the second to the top is self-esteem. And that's the one that I achieved from sailing around the world, or that I would achieve docking my own boat. But self-actualization would come from helping other people to figure that out, creatively experiencing more, helping others experience more about life, and looking for that higher level of accomplishment. I'm not sure. I hope that answers that in a way. And so I think that in retirement, there's a balance that we should seek, which is, sure, you should have all the joys and pleasures of retirement. You should travel. You should experience all these things that you've wanted to experience. But there's also a point where you should be able to pass on your wisdom of life and help others to achieve a higher level of accomplishment for them.
It's a coaching or mentoring part.
Yes. coaching, mentoring, teaching, volunteering, and it doesn't have to be every day. It's just it's a balance.
Yeah. So I'm going to integrate a question from John from Charleston, South Carolina, who says, just so you can expand on this maybe more, Larry. He says, I retired and my wife and I moved to a new area close to our 3 kids about 4 years ago. We still don't really have much of a life. We mostly hang out with family, but I'm desperate for new friends and activities. I've tried volunteering, a few meetups, fitness club, but not really satisfied with my activities or friends. Help. What would you say to John? Yeah.
Thank you, John. Good question. Really good question. And let me back up a little bit and explain something about transitions. There are 3 stages to transitions. And this is I subscribe to the work of William Bridges, who came up with all this, and I agree with it. And the first stage of transition is an ending. So all transitions begin with an end. John and his wife moved. Okay, that was the end of that they experienced. And now they're in the middle, which is the neutral zone. And this is the place where you're seeking other activities, ideas, you're looking for your new passion, and you bounce around from one thing to the next. He's gone to meetups and he's volunteered and he's got activities and he's got his kids and maybe there's grandkids. And they've become probably the built-in babysitter for the grandkids, and he's trying to golf some and still not satisfied. And that's the fulfillment part that he's looking for. And the ideas are you have to keep searching, because this neutral zone is not meant to be a parking lot. You're not supposed to stay in this neutral zone. You've got to find something else and really throw yourself into it. Now, how do you find that thing? There's a couple of things, and I hope that John will be able to download the free tools that I'm including for everybody here. And one of them is the retirement wheel. It's like the wheel of life. And there are 8 different stages or categories rather of your retirement wheel. Then you try to find a balance of all of these things. So sure, there's recreation and there's health and there's financial and there's travel and exploring and learning. Maybe John should go back to school and learn something new. Maybe they should do some other traveling. They're probably locked in by the kids and grandkids, I suspect. There's relationships that needs new friends. They moved from somewhere else, and now they're in a place where their friends probably are mostly their kids and their kids' friends. There's work. Maybe John should find some satisfaction in a little bit of work. Maybe when I say that, maybe it's a half a day a week. Maybe it's 1 day a week. Maybe he wants to start a little business or something. And then social and family, of course. Another tool that is also going to be free for everybody on this call is my passion quiz. And this is a quiz that you take that has about 30 questions on it that forces you to really dig deep and discover what it is you really want to do, what it is you really like to do, and what's going to give you the satisfaction. There's no scoring really on it. It's just a matter of what you do is you look back at the quiz and you look for patterns and you look for words that have been repeated, and some of the questions even seem repetitive, but they're there on purpose to see if you get the same answer to a question worded differently. And if John wants to send that to me, I'd be glad to score it or review it for him and give him some feedback on it as well. So he's got to keep trying. And then that third stage of transition is when Julie Andrews comes running over the hillside singing "The Hills Are Alive." And when you've discovered that thing that you want to do. Now, I've always said to people, find your passion and follow that passion. But when I say that, I say it with a caveat that don't become singular. Find your passion, discover your passion, pursue it. But also remember that the happiest people are those with a balanced life.
Great. Why don't you mention a little more of the other links that people are going to have for listening? Because you do have, in addition to the retirement wheel and the passion quiz, you've got a few other things that people can link to. And this may be a helpful, John's question may have been a helpful springboard for mentioning what the other links will get them.
Absolutely. It's what you're going to get is it's a link. You put in your name and your email, and then you're going to have the ability to get into five different tools. The first one is a retirement wheel. Like I said, you mark it, they'll see it, but it's very self-explanatory, and there's instructions on it on how you use it. And that will give you the idea of, gee, how balanced is my life? And what areas do I need more work? The next one is I have an ebook. It's called The Top 5 Retirement Planning Secrets. We are discussing a lot of them right now. And of course, you don't want me to give away what the 5 secrets are. But it's just a short ebook, and it just reminds people of that they need to have purpose and don't mistake short-term pleasures for true happiness and things like that. The next one is the passion quiz. I think that's probably the most important, and this will help people discover what it is that they truly want to do in their retirement years. And the next one is, it's called a 3-step formula to your Encore. And that's just the steps that the things that you look at to see what it is. If you want like a simplified version of, gee, what should I do? Some people didn't like what they did for a living, but they're also have to recognize that they're probably good at it and have a lot of experience. So what I tell people is that there's a formula to find your Encore. And so you take your vision. What is it that you vision of what you think your retirement should look like? And then you take your passion, which is what you really like. And then you take your skills, your knowledge, your wisdom of what you know. And if you combine those things together, you'll come up with the Encore of what it is that you want to do. And sometimes people need help doing that. So I'm glad to help people. And then how do you find your vision? The 5th gift is enrollment in the course, Sail into Retirement, into the first module, the first 3 lessons of module 1, which, as Dory, are all about visioning and finding your vision, your dream of what you picture your retirement life should be like. And then, of course, you can add that to your passion after you've done the passion quiz. So the 5 gifts all meld together really nicely, and people should be able to get a good start on their retirement plans, whether they're new to retirement or already retired. As a lot of people come to us as coaches after they've been retired for a year or more, and they say, gee, this is it? I thought there would be more to it. I thought I would be more satisfied or fulfilled. How can I find that? And so that's what these tools are designed to do, and I really hope that people will take advantage of them.
Great. Thank you. So just to remember and why don't you just say what your website is so that people can know how to get that?
And so to get the gifts, my website is larryjacobson.com. But in order to get the gifts, there's another link, and that's in the web version of the call here. But for those just listening, it's larryjacobson.com. Then it's a / the number 5, a hyphen, the word free, another hyphen, and the word gifts. So it's 5 free gifts with hyphens in between.
And when the recording's sent out, we'll make sure that link is included so people will have it.
Great. Good.
So Brett, also from South Carolina, from Columbia, has said he's a coach, and he says, in my coaching practice, I'm experiencing a trend that clients are using therapy and coaching. One we see is that they come in to see somebody as a therapist, and then the next week they come in for coaching, and it's working. Are you seeing this trend in your retirement space of retirement coaching?
I am, actually. And actually, just last year, I had a client who came to me, and he was seeing a therapist, and then after about 5 sessions, he said he was going to drop the therapist because the therapists and psychologists work from, how did you get into this position? How did you get here? What has happened in your life to get you to this point where you're confused or where you need help or direction? And coaches, as Brett knows, we work from now forward. And what this client of mine wanted to do is he said, the past doesn't matter so much anymore. And my life is getting shorter now, and so I want just to focus on moving forward. But I do have other clients who are using both and finding it helpful. I think that he's onto something there.
Great. Where do you find your contentment? I think you've alluded to it a little now with some of the coaching work, but where, now that you've had this behind you and you're doing retirement coaching, and do you do other coaching too, or is it mostly the retirement?
I do other coaching. I coach people on leadership. I do leadership workshops for corporations, which is one of my favorite things to do. I love it. And I coach people also on public speaking, and I love that a lot. And I coach entrepreneurs, and mostly I coach for entrepreneurship. I find myself coaching mostly either really young people. So I would do public speaking coaching at an organization called BizWorld, and that's for high school and college kids who are entrepreneurs. And then the other category that I coach in is for 50 plus, because most businesses today are being started by retirees and people who are 50 plus. So that is very rewarding. Now, where do I find my contentment? As I said, it is from achievement. And so if I write an article, I feel content. If I write a new speech, I feel content. If I give a new speech, I feel content. After this podcast, I will have a great deal of contentment because I know that I was able to reach out and touch a lot of people and affect them in a positive way. And so so I'm always looking for something that I can do that's going to help and give back. And that's where I find my contentment.
Great.
And people say, "Oh, do you want to travel somewhere or do any traveling?" And the answer, no, thank you.
And speaking of your contentment and reaching people, just a comment from Tim, who's from Eagle, Idaho, he says, "Hi to you. Met you at a Victory Workspace years ago in Walnut Creek. Glad to see you're still providing excellent, inspiring advice as always." From Tim, SMIRecruiting.com.
Wow. That's fantastic. Tim is a brilliant entrepreneur and was always like one of the movers and shakers. And he was always had something that he was working on that was great. And that was at a mastermind class that I was teaching on entrepreneurship that he was part of. So hello to Tim. Thank you for that.
Okay.
All right.
The Boy Behind the Gate. Why don't you tell us a little about the two books? Because I know you have that and you have a kid's book and you're planning on writing and you're writing some others. So why don't you speak about that? And John, do send me an email or if post it and I can write it down from here. So I have your address and then I'll get it to.
Yeah. So after I finished The Boy Behind the Gate, I went to a writer's workshop up in Montana, and you were forced to sit down and they said, "Well, what are you going to write?" And I had no idea, but I wanted to continue developing my writing skills. And so I decided that I would write the children's version of The Boy Behind the Gate. And it turned out to be not a children's book as in a picture book. There are beautiful illustrations in it that are just great, but it turned out to be more of a middle grade reader. So it's for 8 to 12-year-olds or 8 to 14-year-olds. And it's an actual book, 125 pages, I think, or something like that. And it takes the story of two kids who end up sailing around the world and their adventures. And of course, because it's for kids, I was able to, shall we say, just expand on ideas and I have more fun with it, so to speak. In fact, I remember once I had written myself into a corner or written these kids into a corner where they were stuck and I didn't know how to get them out of the situation that I had written them into. So I was talking to my editor at the time and she said, "Larry, you stop. You need to think like a 10-year-old. This should not be hard for you." And so I did. And then I gave them a kid's way of getting out of this situation. And it's really a lot of fun. And if you read The Boy Behind the Gate and then you read the children's version or the middle grade version, you recognize the stories, you recognize the characters that are canon, and it's really fun. And that's the first of a series. So one of the ideas is that I'm working on is the next book in that series. I also have another book that I'm working on, which is a book of my wisdom. These are sayings that I have come up with over the years that my friends call Larryisms. And I don't think that's going to be the name of the book, but it's going to be a lot of my wisdom sayings. And then the other book that I wrote and that a publisher picked up is called Navigating Entrepreneurship. And this is a book that is used in colleges and universities in their business school. And so I felt honored about that. And then I turned that into a video course. So that's the second video course that I have on my Buoy training site.
So tell us a little about your two courses then. And I know that you have a special deal you're offering people who are listening to this. So why don't you mention that now?
Yeah. So the courses are the first one is the Sail into Retirement. And that is 9 modules. It's 18 videos. It's 21 lessons. It has an action guide that you use along the way to record your answers. And you record them in the system, so you don't have to write anything down. And it keeps your answers for you, and you can go back in anytime you want. And you can go as fast or as slow as you want. And it covers the topics that I believe that all retirees face. So we talk about visioning your dream. We talk about turning your dreams into goals. And we help people through self-analysis. What are they good at? What are they not good at? What would they need help doing? And then a lot of people are afraid to move forward because they think that something they're about to try is risky. So I help them analyze the risk of all these goals that they're now setting. And I help people to learn to make decisions faster and easier. And then, of course, as there's a whole module just about managing your fears. And the next module is keeping a positive perspective and perseverance and commitment. And these are, of course, all are things that we are well versed in, but the way that I think bring them up again for retirees. And it's not just for people who are retiring. I wish I had not named it with the word retirement in it, because it's for people going through any sort of transition, from one career to another, from just really any transition, because it's the same topics. And the second course is the Navigating Entrepreneurship. And there are some of the same stories in both courses as they apply. But the Navigating Entrepreneurship has a lot of different topics to it. It's a shorter course. It's got a lot of modules to it, but it goes quicker. But we talk about fears, and we talk about turning your dreams into goals. So the same kind of a thing, and risks, and making decisions. But for example, in entrepreneurship, we talk a lot about change and how change is in business. You better get used to it, because that's what happens. And we, of course, fear and learning things along the way that you don't have to be the expert. So it's a lot of the same topics. So today we have it set so that if someone does buy the course, Sail into Retirement, they're logged in automatically to the Navigating Entrepreneurship as well. And I have the Sail into Retirement course is now on a special, which is $95. And when I launched the program, it was $2,000. And I decided that I wanted to make it accessible to everybody. So it's $95. And because for your group, Dory, for your listeners, it's $95. And that includes a 90-minute coaching session with me,
Wow.
which normally I would charge like $250 for. So it's a really good deal. And it's so that I can help people. I just want to be able to cement the ideas with them and get them launched into going into a good retirement. And then if someone wants more coaching, I would have to say that the most popular thing that people buy is the Captain program. And that's where you buy the program and it comes with 4 coaching sessions. And that's $9.95. And then if someone wants even more, where we extend it over a longer period of months, then they can buy it with 9 coaching sessions, and that's $19.95. I don't charge a lot for my coaching, and I just really want to help people experience a really good retirement.
great. Those sound like lovely offers. And again, keep in mind that if you've listened today, so how do people, if they want to purchase the $95 thing, is it again through your website? Through the
Yes. You can. Everything can start at my website, which is larryjacobson.com. When they go to the home page, they'll see in the upper right corner where it says free course, and that will take them to the course site. Or if they want to go directly to it, they can go to the training site itself, and that's where you put your credit card in and everything. And that's called Buoy Training. Buoy, as in a buoy in the ocean. BUOY training.com. And both courses are there, and they can see all about the two different courses and purchase if they want. And the idea behind the name Buoy Training and Buoy Coaching is when you're sailing, you follow the buoys, and they lead you to safe waters. And that's how I came up with the name for Buoy Training. I also might mention that right now, I just realized that for the holidays, I had my book, The Boy Behind the Gate, on special on Amazon for $9.95. And normally it's $21. And I realized about a week ago that it's still there at $9.95. So I've kept it there for this group. And so they should be able to go to, if they go to my website, larryjacobson.com, and then at the top, there are different tabs. You can click author. And when you click author, it takes you to a page that has all of my books. And if you click that you wanted to buy it, it takes you to Amazon directly to the link, and that's where you buy it.
Great. And I know you've done some TED Talks, the TEDx Talks. Can you tell people how to access those?
Yes. I've done 2 TED Talks, actually. The first one was about fear and passion, and it's actually called Passion Trumps Fear. And the second one was for a TEDx youth group, and that was about achieving things, achieving big accomplishments, and how to do that. And it's called Passion, Priorities, and Perseverance, the 3 things that I think are necessary for achievement. And both of those are right now on my website, so you don't have to go to YouTube or anything. They're just right there. You just go to larryjacobson.com. At the top of the page, you find another tab that says Speaker. And you click on Speaker, and there they are.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It has been such a delight having you be part of this. And just to mention to people, so Larry uses the sailing as the metaphor because there's so much that's apropos of sailing in terms of decision-making in life and finding our course and following direction and wind and doing the things.
Yeah. It's very true. So much of it applies to retirees, especially in the sense that if you don't know the direction that you're going in, you can just sail around in circles. And so you've got to pick a direction and go that way. And yes, you're right, Dory. The metaphors are endless. Maybe I should write a book just about that.
That'll be part of the Larryisms, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I think there are some of those in there. Yeah.
What would be just 1 or 2 just final takeaways that you want to leave the listeners with?
I would say that a big takeaway should be to when you're retiring, make a plan. Most people have a financial plan for the retirement because that's the question that everybody asks. Do you have enough money for retirement? Okay, if you do have enough money, then what are you going to do with your time? Come up with a plan. And if clients who work with me, they end up with a plan of what they're going to do in both short-term and long-term. But if you don't have to do that, you could just write it on the back of a napkin, and it could say Sundays volunteer at the church for something, and it could say Mondays and Wednesdays golf. It could be Tuesdays and Thursdays mentor at the local high school, or anything. And just have a plan, and even if you start with just 1 day a week, just 1 day a week, what is it that you're going to do? It makes a huge difference because when we wake up in the morning, we need a purpose to get out of bed because bed's pretty comfortable. And you got to have something that you're going to do. If you come up with something that you like for 1 day, and for John, it's see if you can come up with 2 things that you're going to try new. And your plan could be that you don't have a plan, and so that you're just trying different things. That could be the plan right now until you find it. And I would say that's probably the most important idea out of this whole thing.
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time out and coming here with us and sharing your experiences, your wisdom, and your program.
I'm so pleased to be here, and I hope that people will connect with me on my website at larryjacobson.com. There are places all over the website that says contact me, and you can just click on that and just write whatever you want.
Perfect. Do you want to just give people your email address too for a moment?
Sure. They can email me directly. It's easy. It's larry@larryjacobson.com.
Can't be easier than that then.
Yeah, S-O-N, Larry Jacobson with an S-O-N.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you everybody for coming and listening. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you all.
You've been listening to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio with Dr. Dorian Mintzer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, listen to past episodes, or download our free retirement transition guide, visit revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com.